They say sound doesn't travel through brick. That's not true. Not in Berlin. Not in '61. Back then, everything made noise elevators, steam pipes, secrets ... guilt. You just had to know where to press your ear. I wasn't supposed to be involved. Just assigned to listen. Observe from a flat that wasn't mine, above a bakery that didn't bake, next to a wall that wasn't supposed to speak, but it did. And what I heard still wakes me up. Sometimes I think it wasn't even about what they said, but what they knew I'd hear. You wouldn't believe me if I told you the first voice I recognized spoke Russian, with a Tennessee drawl, or that 3 days of silence can be louder than any interrogation. There are names I won't say, not because I'm afraid, because I still care. And maybe I shouldn't. I thought I was just gathering intelligence. Turns out someone was gathering me. Somewhere in that wall between the bricks and the lies, my life was rewritten without my consent. And if you think this is just a story, well, listen closely. Before I regret saying any of this, hit that like button. Subscribe if this is already making you uncomfortable. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from and what time it is. I like knowing where. In the world, people still dare to listen to secrets like these. They called it a passive surveillance assignment. That's bureaucratic talk for sitting alone in someone else's apartment, not touching anything, and pretending you're invisible. The place was in Prenzlauer Berg, on Reichsstraße. Quiet. Too quiet for East Berlin. Most windows were blacked, out by thick curtains. Mine had a single slit, just enough to watch the building next door. The supposed safe house. The flat itself smelled of boiled cabbage and metal polish. Whoever lived there before must have left in a hurry, half an ashtray still warm, a spoon still in the sugar bowl. There was a framed photo of a woman in a nurse's uniform on the mantel. I never moved it, but I looked at her every morning, like she might say something. She never did. Langley didn't want me to interact, just record patterns. 2 entrances. One light on the 3rd floor that flickered during storms. A man in a wool coat who never stayed longer than 20 minutes. All of it went into a little brown notebook I tucked under the radiator. And still, even back then, I felt like the apartment wasn't just watching the safe house. It was watching me. I had only been there 6 days when the rhythm shifted. That morning, the bakery 2 doors down didn't open. That was odd. The smell of bread had been my one constant. Instead, the street was blanketed in wet silence. No radios. No children playing. No footsteps. Just the creaking bones of the building. Then, sometime after noon, I heard something new. A cough. From the wall behind the stove. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The apartment had bad acoustics. Everything echoed. But the cough came again, sharp and close, like someone behind plaster. I pressed my palm to the wall, and I swear, it was warm. I moved the stove. Behind it was a patch of wall that had been replastered recently, lighter color, fine cracks still settling. I tapped, hollow, not fully, but enough to make me sit down, light a cigarette, and just listen. That night, the safe house door opened 3 times. No lights on, no voices, but my wall. At HUMMED. The following morning, I sent a coded message. Through dead drop, new acoustic anomaly. Request contact Mike. Langley answered with silence. No package, no instructions. Just ... wait. Always wait. I knew I shouldn't have improvised. But you spend enough time staring at nothing, and you start seeing things. Or worse, hearing them. I built a makeshift contact mic out of an old Soviet transistor radio and copper wire from the apartment's lamp cord. Primitive, yes, but it worked. I placed it on the hollow patch, tuned the frequency, and slipped on a pair of headphones that still smelled of someone else's scalp. The first sound was a match striking, then paper burning, then a man's voice, low, agitated. He was speaking Russian. I spoke enough to follow. Something about the list not being complete, about the American not knowing he's already in position. Then silence. And then a second voice. That one froze the blood in my wrists. He spoke Russian too, but not like a Muscovite. It was an edge-lazy consonance, misplaced stress. A voice I'd only ever heard at Langley briefings or Southern mess halls. Tennessee, maybe Alabama. That was the first time I realized this wasn't a standard defector route. This was something else. For the next few hours, I sat perfectly still. In that dark apartment, headphones on, pulse hammering my temple. They talked of corridors under checkpoints, of compromised couriers, of someone named Osprey. I knew that name. He was one of ours, or had been. I wrote nothing down that day. I just listened, and I started to wonder if the people behind that. Wall knew I was there. At 3:18 a.m. As I was dozing off in the chair, the static in the headphones shifted. A brief pop, then one word in English, barely audible. Tomorrow. That was it. No sound after. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat there, waiting for tomorrow to arrive. And when it did, it brought something I wasn't ready to hear. Wall was old. Pre-war, maybe earlier. Most apartments in Prenzlauer Berg were built before anyone thought Germans would ever divide themselves by ideology. The plaster flaked when I touched it, like the wall wanted to peel itself open. I kept tapping different sections until I found it again, right behind the stove, just above the gas line. Hollow, but only just, like a cavity filled with something that shouldn't be there. I couldn't shake the idea that someone else had already used this wall before me, maybe even before the safe house became a safe house. I scraped off the top layer with the blunt side of my knife, careful not to crack anything. Beneath the surface was a line of faint vertical ridges brick. Yes, but a section clearly set differently from the rest, reinforced with a cement mix too fine for structural work. Someone had patched something, and someone else had needed to hide it. The contact mic I rigged up worked better than it should have. Crude, but intimate. I could hear chairs move, fabric rustle, a pencil tapping on glass, and voices clearer now, as if the wall wasn't a barrier at all, but a membrane. They were talking about routes again. North through Pankow, one said, not safe anymore. The other disagreed, saying the Polish border was worse. They argued in low tones, tense but familiar. Colleagues, not enemies. And then something odd. The first man mentioned a code phrase I hadn't heard in months. Maple Room. That was from a compromised drop site in Warsaw, closed after a courier vanished. There had been rumors of a double agent, but no proof. Now the phrase was back. In Berlin, I made the mistake of writing that in my notes and underlining it. That night, I dreamt I was behind the wall, not on my side, but inside the bricks. The voices didn't notice me. They just kept talking, walking around me, passing through me. One of them lit a cigarette and dropped the match through my chest. I woke up sweating, smelling ash. The next day, I stayed off the headphones. Just listened directly. The plaster acted like a diaphragm. I could hear better when I placed my fingertips against it and leaned in. That's when I realized the rhythm of the voices changed around the same time every night, 9:12 p.m. Like clockwork, different speakers, different patterns. Like shifts. The strange part? No doors ever opened. No footsteps in the stairwell. No water pipes. No keys turning. Just voices appearing as if conjured. That night, something happened. I heard laughter. Short, bitter, and unmistakably American. Then silence. I pressed harder against the wall, heart drumming. And suddenly, I felt it not just sound, but vibration. Subtle, like a low hum in my bones. I held my breath and realized it wasn't coming from the room next door, but from within the wall itself. Something mechanical? A motor? A device? A recorder? I pulled back. If someone had installed surveillance on their side, then they might be listening back. It hit me like ice. I wasn't alone in surveilling. I was part of someone else's observation. That changed everything. I unscrewed the light bulb, sat in darkness, and waited. 2 hours later, the humming stopped. The voices, when they returned, spoke slower, as if aware of an audience. One of them said a phrase in German I'll never forget. Hört uns. Aber es ist zu spät. He hears us. But it's too late. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I wrote nothing down. And the next morning, when I checked my notebook, the page with Maple Room was gone. Ripped clean, but not by me. The third night, I recognized it clearly. One of the voices was reading from a list. Not out loud, exactly, but in a low mutter. Names, dates, places, none familiar at first. But then came Jansk Verzik, March 60. I had been there. I was watching that building. And there'd been a raid. No survivors. The man reading had a stiff cadence. Russian, yes, but it sounded learned, not lived. You can hear when someone's native, how they breathe the syllables instead of constructing them. This one built every word like a wall. And he used idioms oddly, like someone translating from English on the fly. Then he said another word, Langley. Just once, but clear. I stopped the tape, rewound, played again. Still there. Langley. He knew I was listening. I felt it. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat on the floor, headphones in, every light off, as the voices argued. The second speaker, deeper, more confident, had a cleaner Russian accent. Real, I'd say. But now and then, he slipped. A curse word with a southern lilt. An ain't, hidden between consonants. It wasn't textbook. It was muscle memory. American. He tried to hide it. But I'd spent my youth listening to Americans pretend to be something else. You don't forget that tone. I whispered to no one. You're one of ours, or used to be. Then came another twist. They started speaking English. Not much, just fragments. Phrases like, she knows, and cut the line now. They never said who she was. But whoever she was, they feared her. I wrote female handler in the margin of the newspaper I'd been using as my log. But then the older voice said something that stopped my breath. She already cut the American. No hesitation. No remorse. They were talking about me. Or someone like me. The next morning, I checked the mirror 3 times before shaving. My hands were trembling, even with the razor off. I kept hearing that voice. She already cut the American. Not will. Already. Past tense. Someone had made a decision I wasn't part of. Went back to the headphones. The next voice I heard made me sit upright. A third man. Soft-spoken. High-pitched. He spoke only once, barely above a whisper. Too loud. He might hear. I yanked the headphones off like they burned. I knew the physics didn't make sense. They couldn't possibly hear me through the wall. But then again, I didn't understand why the tape from last night ended 30 seconds early, or why the backup reel I hid in the radiator vent had been unspooled, crushed, and left neatly coiled under my pillow. Someone wanted me to hear ... and someone else wanted me not to. 2 signals, fighting. The next evening, I picked up a shortwave radio and swept the dials. Nothing, except a faint whistling between frequencies at 3.9 megahertz. It repeated every 17 seconds. Just one tone. Like a beacon. I started recording it. And that's when the voice came again. Through the wall. Barely a whisper. Not in Russian. Not in English. But in German. This time. Don't let them make you doubt your ears. I dropped the mic, just like that, hands shaking, knees weak. There was no accent in that voice. It was mine. It was my own damn voice. It was a Tuesday, I think, or maybe Wednesday. In Berlin, the days blurred. Cigarette ash on the sill, cold coffee. In a chipped mug, curtains drawn tight even in daylight. I was already on edge too many nights with too little sleep, and that damn wall breathing against my spine. About around 9 p.m., the voices returned, not all at once. First footsteps, then the low scrape of a chair. I had the headphones on, the contact mic pressed gently against the plaster. The vibrations carried better when the room was quiet, and this time it was. Until one of them spoke. At first, it was routine. Mentions of checkpoints. A courier too green. A phrase, "The bishop has left the board," that I recognized from old training manuals. But then the air changed. The tone dipped, and I heard it. One word. My name, not my real name. The one they gave me. The one only used inside Langley. Files. That name hadn't been spoken aloud since Frankfurt, 59. Since they buried the project it belonged to. He doesn't know yet, the voice said, in English now. But he's already compromised. I froze. For a moment I thought maybe I imagined it. Maybe the mic picked up a stray transmission, or a memory leaking from my own head. But then they said it again, my name, followed by another word, asset. Not agent. Asset. It meant I wasn't in control anymore. I wasn't watching, I was part of the story. And I didn't even know the plot. I yanked the headphones off and stood. My legs didn't feel like mine. I backed away from the wall like it had bitten me. And it had, in a way. It swallowed me whole. I stared at the stove, at the wallpaper peeling in one corner, at the small crack where I'd slipped the listening device no bigger than a beetle. Suddenly, it all looked childish, like a game I was never meant to win. I sat down, tried to steady my hands, lit a cigarette that tasted like sawdust, inhaled, held it, thought. What if this had never been about the safe house? What if I was the safe house? I stayed away from the wall the rest of the night, kept the headphones off. But every sound in the building, pipes groaning, floorboards shifting, felt like someone saying my name again, over and over, just before. Darn, I risked it. Just one more listen. They weren't speaking anymore, just music. A faint, warbled recording of a man humming a lullaby. Russian, I think. And a woman whispered something I couldn't catch. And then silence, not empty, just waiting. Later that day, I walked to the dead drop to check for new orders. Nothing. Not even a decoy envelope. The signal brick hadn't been touched. So I left something. Just a note. 4 words, block letters. Am I still active? I shouldn't have done it. It was emotional, sloppy. But I had to know. That night, the lamp across the street flickered once, paused, then again. I'd never seen it do that before. And when I returned to my flat, the stove had moved. Just slightly, but enough for me to notice. That's when I knew. I wasn't alone anymore, and that whatever they said about me in that room, they weren't wrong. It started with the sound of glass, delicate, rhythmic, like someone stirring ice in a tumbler just behind the wall. But there was no laughter, no clink of conversation, just that fragile swirling in a voice that came through low, tired, maybe even drunk. He was alone, or thought he was. I recognized the tone from 100 debriefings. Someone speaking, freely, because they believed no one was listening. That, or they wanted someone to hear. And that's when he said it. "Goddamn Elliot," he mumbled. "Should have burned it all." The name hit me like a slap. Elliot. Not a code name. A person. A senior liaison from British MI6. I'd met. Him twice, once in Vienna, once in Bonn. Charming in that detached way only British officers could be. Never trusted him, though I never had a reason. Until now. I leaned in, Mike tuned. The man on the other side kept going, as if reading a confession aloud to no one. You can't pass intel through Berlin without Elliot seeing it. He filters everything east of Tempelhof. I stopped breathing. That wasn't just gossip. That was accusation. More than that, it was confirmation. For months, we'd known something was leaking. Briefings that ended in silence. Couriers disappearing. Memos half redacted before they even reached us. We'd blamed the Soviets. A mole, maybe, but not him. Not Elliot. The voice kept unraveling. He gives them the secondary paths. Keeps the primaries clean, the trade-offs clean hands. Fewer bodies. He wasn't just leaking intel. He was managing the war. And we let him. Later that night, another voice joined him, calmer, female, speaking French. She didn't mention Elliot by name, but she referenced Le Canal d'Est Berlin and les sacrifices nécessaires. I'd heard those phrases in reports from Paris, phrased exactly like that. I knew then she was real, not a ghost, not a playback. The Englishman responded. He still thinks it's compromise. It's control. I couldn't listen anymore. I took off the headphones and walked to the window, stared at the lamp across the street, waiting for it to blink, to signal something, anything. It stayed dark, just like the sky, just like the file we had on Elliot. 3 pages, all black ink. I didn't know what to do. If I reported this, it wouldn't go up the chain, it would vanish into it. If I stayed silent, I was complicit. And if I moved too fast, well, Elliot had a long reach. I tried to make a copy of the tape, but it jammed. The reels twisted. The spools cracked. Just static? Sabotage? Or just fear in my hands? Either way, the evidence was gone. The next morning, I opened the door and found a slip of paper under the mat. Folded neatly. No envelope, one word in blue pencil. Careful. Not a warning, not a threat, a reminder. Someone knew I knew, and they were watching how I'd handle it. I made tea, sat by the wall. No headphones. That night, the voices didn't return, but the wall stayed warmed up as if someone was still breathing on the other side. The first night was unsettling. No voices, no footsteps, not even the scrape of a chair or the cough I'd come to expect around 10:15 p.m. Just nothing. I kept the headphones on for 2 hours, adjusted the contact mic, checked the wiring twice. Everything worked, but the wall, once a living, humming barrier, was now dead. Cold even. The second night was worse. My ears had become attuned to the tiniest shifts in plaster, to the pitch of murmurs, the groan of old beams. And now the silence had weight. It pressed against me. I paced the room, rechecked my notes, trying to find some clue that might explain it. Had they moved? Had there been a raid? Or worse, was this their way of letting me know I was no longer needed? No orders came. No coded signals. The lamp across the street didn't flicker. The bakery was closed again, shutters drawn tight like they'd never been open. The whole block felt paused. I lit a cigarette and tried to relax, but even the sound of the flame catching startled me. It was too loud, too real. In the absence of their voices, every sound I made became evidence. On the third day, something strange happened. The silence shifted. I don't mean noise returned. There was still nothing from the other side, but I began to notice a pattern. Every hour, exactly on the hour, a soft metallic tick. I moved around the room to locate it. Finally found it against the far corner, near the floorboards. It was a clock. A pendulum clock, but no clock had been there before. I checked the apartment. No new furniture, no added wiring. The sound wasn't from my side, it was coming from inside. The wall. Every hour on the hour. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Not loud, but precise, mechanical, deliberate. Someone had left it running. A metronome for madness. That third night, I dreamed I was inside the wall again. Trapped between brick and breath. Pressed flat like a pressed flower between dictionary pages. Only the ticking remained, like a heartbeat too slow to sustain life. When I woke, my fingers were clenched so hard they'd gone numb. I stayed away from the mic that day. Watched the street instead. No one came or went. Curtains didn't move. The bakery's sign swung once in the breeze, then stopped. It felt like the entire block had exhaled and forgotten how to inhale again. By the time evening came, I was convinced I'd been shut out, that whatever game I was part of had ended without telling me the score. I considered burning my notes. Just leaving. No report, no debrief. Just a ghost slipping back across the line. And then, just before midnight, I heard it. Not through the wall. From within my apartment, a floorboard near the stove creaked. Then silence. Then another creak, but I was alone. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Just listened. The air was thick, like before a storm. The clock ticked on. Calm, unbothered. I pressed my back to the wall, listening again. Still nothing. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence wasn't absence. It was a test. A new phase. And the wall quiet, breathing, ticking was still very much alive. I had stopped expecting sound. That was the trick. The silence became so absolute, so heavy, that anything else felt like a memory. The ticking of the hidden clock had become the only companion left. I started marking the hours in a small notebook, just to anchor myself. Every tick, every tock reminded me time was still moving, even if the mission wasn't. Then, at 12:03 a.m., it happened. One sound, sharp, sudden, a thud, not like a chair falling, or a book dropped. No, this was wet, final, like the weight of a body surrendering to gravity. I froze. The mic hadn't picked it up. It came directly through the wall. I pressed my ear against the plaster and held my breath. Nothing. Then, faintly, so faint it could have been imagined, breathing. But not normal breathing. Ragged, uneven. Someone trying to stay alive. Or trying. Not to be heard. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then silence returned. I stayed there, ear to wall, for almost an hour. At 1 a.m., the pendulum ticked again. Normal. Unconcerned. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I tested the contact mic again. Static. No vocal frequencies. Just a low hum, like a cable cut loose underwater. I wrote in my log, possible injury or extraction. No confirmation. It felt stupid. I felt stupid. That sound, the thud, kept replaying in my mind. I tried to guess the weight, the posture, whether it was a fall or a push. But I couldn't. Stop thinking about the breathing. Someone was still alive. Maybe just barely. And then by the time I poured my coffee, I realized what bothered me most. There had been no follow up, no voices checking on him, no footsteps, no door creak, just absence. As if the event didn't need witnesses. That afternoon, I walked to the market under false pretenses. Bought bread I didn't need. Walked past the building's front, looked up at the windows. The safe house shutters were closed, as always. But the third floor, the one I'd been listening to, had a cracked pane now, just barely. Like someone had struck it from inside. Back at the flat, I sat by the wall again. No mic, just skin on plaster. I whispered, "Are you still there?" Nothing. I whispered it again, not expecting an answer. And then the clock stopped. No tick, No talk. Just dead air. I checked my own watch. 6:42 p.m. That clock hadn't missed a beat in 3 days. Now it had. That night, I prepared for sleep but didn't undress. Left the light dim, the curtains closed, the door unlocked. At 11:55 p.m., I lit a cigarette and waited. Midnight. Past. Nothing. 12:03. Came again. And that's when I heard it, not a sound. A presence, like someone standing on the other side of the wall, not speaking, not breathing, just being. Like the air, thickened where he stood. I stepped back from the wall, slowly, sat on the couch, waited. Then, faintly, from the wall, one single breath and a whisper. Not in Russian, not in English. But in my voice. Just one word. Stay. The morning after that whisper, I didn't leave the apartment. Not to the drop site, not to the corner cafe, not even to check if the bakery had reopened. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall like it might crack open and explain itself. At noon, the ticking returned. Same tempo, same clarity, but not the same. It felt deliberate, like someone had turned it back on just to let me know they could. That night, I reconnected the contact mic. It squealed at first, feedback I hadn't heard before. I adjusted the frequency. The static settled, and then the voices returned. But they were not the voices I knew. The Russian was too clean, textbook. No idioms, no slang. Each word spaced, like an officer reading an internal memo, controlled, disciplined, sterile. I listened closer. There was no arguing, no stress in the cadence. Whoever was speaking was rehearsed. A replacement. Then came the second voice. French, clear, commanding. Parisian upper register, clipped consonants. I couldn't place it to a name, but I'd heard that kind of voice before in NATO briefings. In intelligence exchanges when no one trusted the other, but smiled anyway. They weren't hiding anymore. They wanted me to listen. The French speaker issued directives. Something about consolidating le material and a new schedule. The Russian responded with perfect compliance. It wasn't a conversation. It was protocol. And then they said a phrase I hadn't heard in years. Le projet. Miroir. I dropped the pencil. Mirror project. That was sealed. Buried under so much red tape, it might as well have been myth. An initiative to create doubles, lookalikes, voice matches, psychological mimics. We used it to test our own people, and sometimes to replace them, but it failed, or so we were told. I wrote the phrase on my forearm with a pen, just to remind myself it was real. Then the French voice said something else. The original has degraded. Time to recalibrate. The Russian agreed. I stood, stepped away from the wall. The original? Were they talking about the man I'd heard die? Or about me? I tried to make sense of it, pacing back and forth, thinking about the past conversations, the shifts in accent, the odd familiarity of the whispers. The moment I heard my own voice, what if I wasn't just the observer? What if I was the mirror? At 2:17 a.m., the lamp across the street flickered. 3 times, for the first time in days. And then the voices stopped mid-sentence. Just cut, like scissors through thread. I leaned into the wall. Nothing. The ticking had stopped again. The air smelled of something I hadn't noticed before. Ozone. The scent of a shorted wire, or maybe a machine just shut down after long use. Then, faintly, I heard it. Not through the wall this time. From the hall. Footsteps. Just 2. Then silence. I opened the door. Nothing. Except a burnt match on the threshold. Stared at it for a long time. Then looked up at the empty hallway and whispered back, I'm still listening. It was just after sunset when I heard the sound. A soft drag, faint friction across the floor outside the apartment. I didn't move, just listened. Then the pause. And then the crumpling. Not of paper, thicker. Cardboard. I waited a full minute before opening the door. Nothing. Except a flat parcel. Square and rigid, tucked just beneath the threshold of the apartment next door. The one I'd been listening. To all this time, I shouldn't have touched it. But I did. Gloved hand, slow movement, no noise. The weight was familiar. Maybe half a pound. Thin, deliberately packed. It gave slightly when I pressed my thumb to the center. Just enough to recognize the interior material. Photographs. Classified format. The kind we used before optical. Miniatures 8x10 prints. Glossy. Sealed with graphite edges to prevent light bleed. No markings on the package. No recipient. But the corner of the envelope had a crease, like someone had held it too tightly before sliding it across the floor. Back inside. I didn't open it. Not yet. Just placed it on the table and stared. Lit a cigarette. Let the smoke curl around it, like fog around a tombstone. Whoever left it knew. I'd find it, but not who I'd give it to. That was the message. At midnight, I broke the seal. The photos were black and white. Matte finish. A sequence. Grainy, but deliberate. Surveillance images. Me. From behind. From the side. Leaning into the wall. Writing. Sleeping. Eating. Then, a shot of me looking directly at the camera. I don't remember that moment. Or maybe I do, and I've just buried it. Beneath the stack of photos, a single typewritten page. No header. No classification markings. Just one sentence. Obedience can be verified. That was it. Not a threat. Not an instruction. A fact. I burned the page in the sink. The photos I kept. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself it happened. Maybe because I wasn't ready to let go of the evidence. Of myself. The next day, I tried to retrace the sound. How it slid. From where. No clues, no footprints. Not even dust disturbed. But when I pressed my ear to the wall again, the air behind it felt thinner. Like the room had been emptied. The voices didn't return. Just a low hum, familiar now. Reassuring, even. And then, just before I pulled away, something new. A different crumpling sound. Not from the floor. From within the wall itself. Placed my hand flat. Waited. Nothing. Then, a single slow exhale. Right where my palm rested. I whispered, "Why are you showing me this?" And the wall replied, not with words, but with a pulse. One dull thump, like a heartbeat under concrete. That night, I slept on the floor, right beside it, and dreamed of cardboard stretching endlessly in the dark, filled with photographs that hadn't been taken yet, of me, looking into cameras I hadn't found. I hadn't worn that coat in days. Too heavy for the heat creeping through the apartment. But that morning, something told me to check it. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe it was the weight, just a little heavier than I remembered. The coat hung on the back of the door, untouched since the whisper. I lifted it slowly, feeling through the lining. Nothing in the outer pockets. Nothing in the cuffs. Then I reached into the inside breast pocket, where I used to keep my fake ID, back in Vienna, and my fingers. Brushed paper, folded once, cotton. Texture, not standard agency stock. I pulled it out with tweezers and held it to the window light. One sentence, handwritten, barely legible, in a graphite line so thin it looked like a whisper itself. Sig escuchando, pero no on forms. Keep listening, but don't report. No signature. No code. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether I was more disturbed by the message or the language. Spanish. I didn't speak it. Not well, but someone knew I'd understand enough to obey. And it wasn't just a suggestion. It was an order. But from whom? Not Langley. They didn't use Spanish for internal messages. And they didn't tell field agents to disobey the chain, unless the chain had already been cut, unless I was the last link still holding. I folded the note again, carefully, slid it into a matchbox, burned the matches, hid the box under the sink, behind the U-bend. Then I looked at the coat again, inspected every seam, every fold. The stitching wasn't mine. Someone had opened the lining. Someone had been in my room. In my clothes, I wanted to tear the apartment apart, rip the plaster, smash the wall, scream, but I didn't. I sat down, smoked, waited. That night, I listened. No. Voices. No humming. Just the ticking, mechanical, precise, until 3:17 a.m., when it stopped again, exactly 1 minute before the lamp across the street blinked twice, then held steady. That had never happened before. Usually it was 3 blinks. No, 2. A new pattern. A new directive? I didn't decode it. I didn't send a report. I didn't even write it down. I just listened and tried to remember the last time. I chose not to send information. I couldn't. Not once in my career had I withheld intel. But now the wall knew more than the agency. And the note in my coat, whoever left it, was treating me like a node in something bigger. Not a spy. Not a man. A conduit. Maybe I always was. Just a wire in someone else's circuit. At first, I thought it was just a wiring issue. The building across the street was older than mine, even. Same bullet-pocked facade, same sagging balconies, same post-war ghosts stitched into the mortar. But around the 8th night of silence, I noticed it. 2:17 a.m. On the the lamp in the 3rd floor. Window blinked. 3 times. Soft, deliberate. Not a flicker, not a power surge. A coded signal. 1, 2, 3. Pause. Darkness. I waited the next night. Same hour. Same window. Same 3 blinks. After the 5th occurrence, I started logging it. Days, times, intensity. Always 2:17. Always 3 pulses. Never more. Never less. At first, I thought it might be Soviet signaling, maybe a local relay point, or someone's signal to a courier. But then I remembered something. That window, it had always been dark. 4 weeks. No signs of life. And yet now, this nightly ritual constant, controlled, like someone turning a page only I could see. I watched it through binoculars. Couldn't make out who was behind the curtain. Just the faint glow before and after. Then, on the 10th night, something changed. Only 2 blinks, and the 3rd never came. I sat there for an hour, waiting. But nothing. The wall behind me buzzed faintly like it wanted to say something, but couldn't. I looked at the clock. 2:21? A M. Still no 3rd blink. And then I remembered the note in my coat. Sigue escuchando. Pero no on forms. The missing blink wasn't a failure. It was a message. Response. Someone had read the silence in my last report, because there hadn't been one. Someone was acknowledging it. Not with words, with absence. A missing blink can scream louder than 3 full signals. The next night, I stayed seated at the desk with a cigarette half lit. 2:17 came. 2 blinks again, then a pause, then a burst of static from the wall. Short, electric, dry. Not a voice, not a recording, but a pulse. Timed, intentional. I turned on the mic. Nothing. Then, very faintly, the ticking resumed, but faster, almost urgent, like the clock was trying to warn me of something it couldn't phrase. I placed a matchbox next to the mic, watched the vibration pattern. The matchsticks trembled, but only for 7 seconds. Then silence again. I wrote down 1 word. Countdown? I didn't sleep that night. Didn't blink either. Just stare across the street, waiting for a pattern I didn't know how to read. And for the first time, I wondered if the person behind the signal was watching me too. If they had been all along, maybe we were both just mirrors, each reflecting a light. We no longer controlled Dot. It's been weeks since the last voice, Dot, maybe months. I've stopped measuring time the way I used to. The lamp across the street no longer blinks. The ticking behind the wall is gone. No breath, no shuffle, no static. The wall feels like a tomb now cold, sealed, deaf, and yet, sometimes at night, I press my ear against it again. Not out of duty, out of something else, Dot, habit, hope, or guilt. Maybe all three, and that's when it happens. Only in those silent hours, when the city has collapsed into itself and the fog curls like smoke between the eaves. A whisper, just faint enough that I question it every time. A single word, Dot, my name, spoken, softly drawn out like a question, not the one I use now, not the one on the passport I keep in the freezer, but the old one, the name only a handful of people ever used. Some of them dead, some of them maybe still listening. Dot, it comes from deep inside the wall, as if the bricks themselves are exhaling. I once thought it was memory, Dot, but memories don't echo like that, Dot. And then, one night, it added something. Where are you? I pulled away like it had slapped me. My ears rang. My stomach clenched. I didn't respond, didn't dare, because if I answered, I knew something would answer back. The next day, I searched for construction permits. Nothing. No records of renovations. No demolition. The building was still listed as unoccupied, but I'd seen shadows in those windows. Felt heat from walls that shouldn't breathe. I even called in an old former contact in French intelligence. Asked if there were any underground relay programs still active in Berlin. He laughed. Said those lines went dead in '65. But I don't believe that, because the wall isn't just a wall anymore, Dot. It remembers, Dot. It remembers me, Dot. There are nights I wake from dreams I didn't know. I had dreams of tunnels and red bulbs and people who look like me but aren't. Of cassette tapes playing backwards. Of fingers tapping on glass from inside a mirror. And always, that voice, Dot, my name. Then silence. Then nothing. Then my name again. I've stopped sending reports. Langley hasn't called in years. Or if they did, someone else picked up. I haven't. Check, Dot. Sometimes I think the mission ended. Sometimes I think it never did. And on the worst nights, I wonder if the wall was never real to begin with. Just a skin stretched tight between two versions of me. One who listened, Dot, and one who knew. Apartments long gone now. Renovated, probably. New paint, clean wiring, digital locks. But I wonder if the wall's still there. If someone leans into it late at night and hears SOMETHING, a breath, a name, a question no one taught them to answer. Sometimes when it rains, I catch myself listening for that ticking. Not a sound you forget. I've lived other lives since then. Other countries. Other names. But none of them quieted that voice, Dot. It still visits. Never loud. Never clear, Dot, but always familiar. Like a version of myself that never stopped recording, Dot, never stopped waiting. Just last week, I found a matchbox in my coat again. Empty, except for one folded scrap of paper, Dot, no message. Just the crease, Dot, like someone had opened it, read it, closed it again, and left it there. For me to remember, Dot, or for me to return. If you stayed through all this, maybe you've heard things others haven't. Subscribe and tell me what you knew about this story. I'll be listening. Always.